11 years ago, I signed a piece of paper my son never read past the signature line. Last month, that piece of paper is the reason his wife stood up in front of 200 people and called me a controlling old woman who needed to learn her place. She had no idea she was talking to her own landlord. I'm Renata Ashworth. I'm 61. And before I tell you what happened at that microphone, you need to understand what I own, because nobody at that wedding did, not even the groom. Stick around, because the woman who tried to humiliate me that night spent the whole reception standing on a floor she didn't know I could pull out from under her, and by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how. My husband Daniel died on a Tuesday in March, 11 years ago. Heart, not a warning in sight, 49 years old, gone in the parking lot of his own hardware store before the ambulance made it 4 blocks. My son Marcus was 22, 3 months out of culinary school, no money, and suddenly no father. Grief makes some people fall apart. It made me count things: inventory, invoices, the exact number of casseroles the neighbors brought over, 19, if you're curious. I'd spent half my life running our small property management company out of a spare bedroom, and numbers were the one language that didn't lie to me the year everything else did. So when Marcus said he wanted to open a food truck, just to try, I didn't lecture him. I wrote a check. $22,000, my first mistake, if you want to call it that. I don't. Not really. Not yet. Here's the thing about my son. He is warm in a way I never learned to be. Strangers tell him their divorce stories in grocery store lines. He remembers birthdays. He tips too much. He makes people feel like the only person in the room. His father had that same gift. I loved watching him have it. I also watched, over the years, how easily people mistook his warmth for money in his pocket. The truck did well. Better than well. By year 3 he had 2 trucks and a catering contract with a hospital system, and by year 5, investors were circling a permanent location. That's when he called me, not to ask for a check this time, but for something bigger. Mum, I need a business partner with actual capital, somebody who trusts me. I trusted him completely. I also, and I want you to sit with this, did not trust the restaurant industry, which eats young owners alive with the predictability of a tide table. So I structured it the way I structure everything, carefully, and mostly invisible. We formed an LLC, Ashworth Reyes Hospitality Group. Reyes was his father's mother's name, Marcus's idea, sentimental, sweet. I put in the building, all of it, cash, no mortgage, a converted warehouse near the river that I bought under the LLC's name. Marcus put in the concept, the menu, the sweat, the 16-hour days. On paper, it looked like a 50-50 partnership between mother and son. Warm, simple, a story people like telling at dinner parties. It was not 50-50. I hold 51%. Marcus holds 49%. There is a voting control clause, drafted by my attorney, that gives the majority shareholder authority over major decisions. Leases, distributions, and, this part matters later, the removal of any officer for cause. Marcus signed it at my kitchen table the week before opening night, scanning it the way you scan a menu you already know you're ordering from. He trusted me. He still does, mostly. I built that structure so that if his warmth ever got exploited, by a bad manager, a bad supplier, a bad anybody, I would have the power to fix it quietly before it became a headline. I never imagined the bad anybody would be the woman he married. Her name is Chloe Calloway, and I met her the same year the second restaurant opened. She arrived at my house for the first dinner with a candle as a gift, and complimented my dinnerware before she said a full sentence to me. Nice enough, I told myself. Nervous, maybe. It took 4 more dinners before I noticed what she was actually doing at my table. She wasn't making conversation, she was making an assessment. She asked, almost lightly, how the restaurants were financed, whether Marcus owned the buildings outright, whether the LLC had complicated ownership. I told her the truth, mostly. It's a family partnership. Marcus runs it. I helped him start it. She smiled, like she'd filed that away somewhere. I want to tell you, the wedding planning was where things went wrong, but honestly, it started smaller than that, months earlier, at the restaurant itself. Chloe began showing up during service, not to eat, to help with vendor relationships, and within a few weeks, Our produce supplier of 6 years was gone, replaced by a company that turned out to be owned by her college roommate's father. Nobody voted on that. Nobody asked the 51%. I let it go. One supplier. Not worth a war. Then it was staffing. Then it was a rebrand consultant, $12,000, who Chloe hired directly and told Marcus was already approved. When I finally asked to see the invoice, my son actually laughed, a little embarrassed. "Mum, it's fine. Chloe's got great instincts for this stuff." I did the math that night at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd signed the operating agreement, and the number bothered me less than the sentence did. Chloe's got great instincts. Not we decided, not I decided. A woman who had never signed a single restaurant document was quietly becoming the second voice in a business she owned 0% of. I didn't say anything. That's the part I need to own, out loud, because it matters for what happened next. I told myself weddings make people territorial, that it would settle once the ring stopped being new. I was wrong, and I knew I was wrong roughly around the same time I found out I wasn't invited to help choose the wedding venue. A wedding I was, by the way, asked to help fund to the tune of $31,000 in installments through my son, who never once said the word asked. He said things like, "The venue deposit's due Friday, isn't that insane?" And by Monday the money was gone, same as it had always been since he was 22 and grieving his father. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, Chloe's mother Diane stood up with a glass of Prosecco and thanked, by name, every person who had believed in these 2 kids from day one. She thanked her own sister. She thanked a bridesmaid's father who'd apparently helped source the flowers wholesale. She did not thank me, the woman who owned the building the rehearsal dinner was catered out of. I told myself, tomorrow is the day that matters. Let her have her toast. I should tell you now, I did not bring an envelope to that wedding. I didn't need one. I brought something better, and I didn't know yet that I was going to need it by 9 o'clock that night. The wedding itself was lovely, genuinely. String lights, my son crying at the sight of her coming down the aisle, and me crying too, because grief doesn't check your daughter-in-law's character before it shows up at moments like that. I sat in the second row, correctly seated, no seating chart drama, no misspelled place card. Chloe was too controlled for anything that sloppy. Her cruelty, it turns out, was going to be scheduled. It came during the toasts. Not from the maid of honor, not from Marcus, from Chloe herself, glass raised, microphone in hand, looking directly at me across 200 faces. "I want to say something about family," she said, "because I think it's important to be honest on a day like this. Marcus and I are building something completely our own, and I think everyone here knows that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let go, completely. Not hover over every decision, not treat grown adults like they still need permission. A small laugh from the room, the kind that happens when people aren't sure if they're allowed to laugh. So Renata, I hope you'll take this as the gift it's meant to be. It's time to really let Marcus be his own man. Starting tonight." 200 people looked at me at once. My son looked at his shoes. "I want you to notice something before I tell you what I did, because everyone assumes the next part is where I stood up and made a scene. I didn't. I have never once in my professional life solved a problem by raising my voice in a room full of witnesses, and I wasn't going to start at my son's wedding. I smiled, the smile I use with difficult tenants, and I said, 'Thank you for your honesty, Chloe. I think honesty is exactly what tonight calls for.' Then I excused myself to get some air, and I walked out to the parking lot, and I made 2 phone calls in 11 minutes. The first was to my attorney, Priya, who has drafted every document in Ashworth Reyes Hospitality Group for 6 years. Priya. I need an emergency vote of the majority shareholder on file by Monday morning. I'm exercising the 4-cause removal clause on the marketing consultant Chloe brought in, the $12,000 one who was never approved by the board, and I want the supplier contracts pulled and reviewed, every one Chloe touched." "You're sure?" Priya said, not a question, a confirmation, the way lawyers ask when they already know the answer. "I own 51% of a company my daughter-in-law just told 200 people I have no business having an opinion about," I said. "I've never been more sure of a vote in my life." The second call was to the bank that handles ARG's operating accounts, to flag any new authorized signer requests for review, Because 3 weeks earlier, without telling me, someone had submitted paperwork trying to add Chloe as a signer on the business checking account. I'd caught it and quietly declined it. I hadn't told Marcus. I was giving him the chance to bring it up himself. He never had. Here is what nobody in that tent knew while the band played and the cake got cut. The building they were standing in. No, not that one. A different one. The flagship location. The one with Marcus's name in gold lettering on the window. Sits on land I own outright. Leased to the LLC, at below market rate. A lease I control the renewal terms of. And the woman who'd just told me to disappear for the crime of caring too much had, 3 weeks earlier, tried to get her name on an account she had never once put $1 into. I went back inside. I did not go to the microphone. I found my son by the gift table, and I said one sentence, quiet, just for him. Come see me Monday before you open. There are some documents you need to actually read this time. Then I hugged him, told him I loved him, and I left before the last dance, because I am proud, not petty, and I wasn't going to let 200 people watch me leave in tears when I could leave on my own schedule instead. Monday came fast in my son's world. The removal notice on the unauthorized consultant went out. The supplier review came back exactly as I suspected. Chloe's college roommate's father was billing 20% over market for produce that was, frankly, worse. The declined signer request finally came up in conversation, except it wasn't a conversation. It was Marcus standing in my office doorway, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years since Saturday. You never told me she tried to get on the account. I was waiting to see if you would tell me, I said. You didn't. He sat down across from me, the same way he used to when he was 17, and needed money for something he didn't want to explain. She says you're punishing her for one comment at the wedding. She says you're using the company like a leash. I have heard that word, leash, used against generous people my whole career, always by the people who resent that the generosity had terms. I looked at my son and told him the truest thing I know. Marcus, I built this company so nothing bad could happen to you without my consent. I never used that power once, not in 6 years, until a woman with 0% ownership tried to walk out of a wedding with quiet control of a business she's never signed a single document for. That's not a leash. That's a lock. And I'm the only one who's had a key this whole time. He didn't come around right away. For about 6 weeks, our calls got shorter, and I let them, because I wasn't going to argue my way into being liked. Chloe, for her part, stopped coming by the restaurants entirely. Turns out it's harder to run a shadow campaign for control once the actual owner is watching the books. The rebrand consultant was quietly let go. The original produce supplier came back at his old rate, cheerfully, the way vendors do when they realize the grown-up is back in charge. Then, 8 weeks after the wedding, Marcus showed up at my office on a Thursday, with 2 coffees and no appointment. He set mine down, sat across the desk, and didn't circle anything, which for my son is rare. I read the operating agreement, he said. All of it, this time. Every clause. A pause. You could have pulled the building lease any time these past 6 years. You never did. I never had a reason to, I said. You gave me one exactly once. He was quiet for a while, turning his coffee cup the way his father used to turn a coin when he was thinking. I think I married someone who wanted the restaurant more than she wanted me sometimes. I didn't want to see that. It was easier to think you were the problem. I didn't gloat. I want that on the record. I just said, that's not mine to fix, sweetheart. But the 51% is staying exactly where it is. Not because I don't trust you. Because I trust you enough to let you build something you can't lose to anyone but yourself. I don't know what happens with the marriage. That's not a story I get to write the ending of. And honestly, I've stopped trying to write endings for other people's choices. I only get to write mine. What I do know is that 3 months after that wedding, my son sat across from me and, for the first time in 11 years, asked to see the full financials of a business we technically already shared. Not because he had to, because he wanted to understand what he actually owned and what he didn't. If you've ever built something generous and had someone mistake it for something they were entitled to control, tell me in the comments. I want to know what you did with your 51%, whatever form it took. And if you like stories about quiet women who read every line before they sign, subscribe, because Table 9 isn't the only seat I've ever had to reclaim. I'll see you at the next one.